First is I'm passionate about India-Nepal relationship, and this is a subject very close to my heart, and I've been dealing with it almost for 20 years.
Yeah.
And it's not only that when I'm on a desk dealing with Nepal or I was ambassador, but even otherwise I've always followed events in Nepal with great interest. Secondly, I also felt that there were so many misperceptions and misunderstandings on both sides. And I thought it's important to be transparent and explain to the general public, the nature of the relationship, what are the issues in the relationship, both positive and negative,
Right.
and what we should, try to do in the future. What is the future vision of our relationship? So basically, these were the ideas. I had no intention, but then the publisher asked me and said, please do this. So I said, okay, let me give it a try. And, I sat and wrote it, and I found it very interesting because, I was able to focus my thoughts on the various issues. And I hope the book, will be interesting, especially to the younger generation of Nepalis and Indians. I don't think any two countries are comparable, and certainly Nepal is very different from Bhutan. But I was looking at it more from the Indian perspective, that we have these treaty relations with our two Himalayan neighbors. And, it was the same sorts of issues. We had the 1949 treaty with Bhutan, the 1950 treaty with Nepal. And both countries want to change the treaties for similar reasons.
Right.
And we have succeeded in one case, but in the second case, we have not. And, I don't think the intention is to compare. I know how sensitive this issue
But
is. So I think, one should look at it pragmatically.
Yeah.
And, I think scholars in Nepal should look at the India-Nepal treaty, the India-Bhutan treaty. Any treaty has to have something in it for both sides. So India has certain interests, Nepal has certain interests. Only if both sets of interests are met will there be a treaty. And I think this is doable. As I said, in the case of Bhutan, we have succeeded. So there's no reason we can't succeed in the case of Nepal. On the future of the relationship, we have very solid foundations. We have civilizational ties, familial ties, very strong ties. But I think the future should be based on the economic dimension of the relationship. So I really think that this is the area that we really need to push. And we should look at our region as a common, interdependent, economic space. And I think that is the way to go forward. If you look at the geopolitics of the world today, it's changing. So on the one hand, you have this contestation for influence between the US and China. On the other hand, you have an India-China relationship that is very fraught right now, and especially after the Ladakh incident. So this becomes a very sensitive issue from India's perspective. And in our neighborhood, we have very strong links with all our neighboring countries. So I know that China's influence is growing as China is becoming very strong and very rich. There are economic opportunities. So I can understand Nepal's interest and perspective. So I don't think anybody questions that. But it's only on issues relating to security that we feel that, our neighboring countries should be sensitive to India's concerns and interests. And it is India's job to explain these concerns to our neighboring countries. So that's that's what I was trying to convey. It depends if you look at it in a short term or a long term. So I don't think I would say Chinese failure. You could have a long-term strategic objective of uniting the communist forces. And it appears that that is China's objective. So one setback in a particular, year doesn't necessarily mean that they will not pursue that objective. I feel that I think they have made a strategic decision to strengthen the relationship with China, and especially the links between the various communist parties of China and of Nepal. And, they have spoken in favor of unification of the communist force in Nepal. And that is their long-term goal. So, I personally feel that, they will probably continue to work on this basis. Of course, politics of Nepal is very complicated. And I guess it's for the Nepalese people to decide what kind of relationship they want with the Chinese. So certainly the recent events show that though they may be communist parties, they can still have major differences and, hence they split. But what I'm trying to say is that I don't know what China's long-term goal in Nepal. I don't know why you would say failure, because nations have long-term strategic interests. And there may be you achieve a certain policy at a point in time, maybe you don't, you continue to pursue it. So as I said, if you look at it in a very short-term perspective, certainly I think this is something for the people of Nepal to see. Is it in Nepal's interest to have a such a strong communist dominance? One thing I've noticed in Nepal is that if you look at the top leadership of Nepal, it's been more or less the same leadership over the last 30 years, 25, 30 years.
Yeah, you mentioned that well.
And of course, I've interacted with all the leaders. So, the comments I've made are honest comments on the basis of my personal interactions
and
with
in
various
terms of
leaders.
Prachanda, you have said he is little unstable.
He has been a very major force in Nepali politics for 3 decades.
Right.
And if you look at the very major transformations in Nepali society and politics, he has been instrumental in many of these changes. And I have also referred to him as a very engaging personality. So, every individual has pluses and minuses, and you have to take them as a whole. So, I have only, respectfully referred to all the leaders. I don't think I mean to criticize anyone. So, first thing I want to say is that I have written an honest book, and I stand by everything I have written in the book. Second point I wanted to make is that the incidents you refer to are 2 separate incidents. It's not the same incident. And the third point, of course, is that I wanted to explain to the people of India and Nepal, one of the constant criticisms of India has been that India micromanages. I was trying to say that, sometimes this is not because we are doing it, sometimes it also happens because of requests from the other side. And these incidents I had presented only as an example that sometimes, this also happens. And I said that, these, obviously, some people are happy, some are not happy, so there are implications of this. But I was just trying to explain to the people of Nepal, this is not a one-way street. Nepal is a sovereign country. I don't think there's any debate on sovereignty. But I think historically, since King Prithvinarayan Shah, Nepal's self-identity and assessment has been that it is a yam which is stuck between 2 hard rocks. And so I think Nepal's self-perception is that it always has some fear from one or the other neighboring country. And I think in today's day and age, maybe 200 years ago this might have been valid. But in today's days and age, I think it's a modern world. You're going towards economic integration and prosperity. So this is something that I think the Nepalese people have to much more difficult to resolve following the publication of the new map by Nepal in 2020. So this issue has become very difficult now. And also after the map, you went in for a constitution. For India, since you have made a constitutional amendment, so how do we negotiate with a government delegation if we don't know whether or not there will be a constitutional amendment to endorse whatever agreement we arrive at? That's point number 1. Point number 2, this issue I have discussed in very great detail, and I have studied it in very great detail, and I have given a lot of evidence in the book. I personally feel that this claim of Nepal is not correct. And that this was tried in 1817, more than 200 years ago, and it had been rejected. And in 1860, we had a final settlement.
You have mentioned that British never responded.
And I have not seen any evidence given by Nepalese authorities in justification of their claim. So we in India were very surprised that one fine day you publish a new map without any evidence. So I personally feel that this is to do with internal politics of Nepal. But if you bring in such a sensitive issue with India in your internal politics, then obviously it's going to create a lot of problems. It's not clear how to proceed on this matter. Because, unless, how can a Nepalese government delegation give a guarantee that the agreement will be endorsed by Parliament? So it's become very complicated, and this is very unfortunate. We don't consider it a disputed territory. We consider it Indian territory, and I've given enough evidence for this. And earlier when this issue was being discussed, it was only relating to Kalapani. a small area, but now this has become so much larger.
Yeah.
So I think this issue has become much more complex and much more difficult to resolve. Especially demonetization, it's a small amount of money and this should have been resolved. I think earlier there was a feeling that, a lot of black money may come from India into Nepal and so on. But now I think the situation is different. EPG, frankly, I don't know why the EPG report has not been accepted. But the very fact that it has not been accepted for so long means that there is some problem.
Yeah.
And it's really for the government to say what is the problem. But my feeling is that, Nepal should not make it into an issue. Because, see, the EPG report is of some non-governmental expert. The main issue that Nepal is interested in is the 1950 treaty. So, I personally feel that instead of focusing so much on the EPG report, why it has not been accepted, why it has, what is the problem, better to start the negotiations on the 1950 treaty directly at the foreign secretary level. So I personally feel this is the way to go.
Yeah.
And why it has not been accepted, I don't really know. But what I'm saying is that it has not been accepted for more than 2 years, so we don't know if it will be accepted in the future. So why make this an issue? The main issue in the EPG is the 1950 treaty. So let's start talking on that. For India, Nepal is a very, very important country. And we have to deal with whichever government is in power, with all governments, whether communist, democratic, all governments we have to deal with. And I am for much stronger engagement, not only at government to government level, but at party to party levels. So I think this is a very good initiative that has been taken, for a BJP delegation to have come here, to have invited the Nepali Congress delegation to India. We must have more of these exchanges because this way we will build on the mutual trust and mutual understanding. And these exchanges should be with all political parties. Not only the ruling party, but with all other political parties. Because today you have one ruling party, tomorrow it may be another ruling party. And our interests in India-Nepal relations are so strong and they will remain forever. We must strengthen this engagement. And I think this is a very good initiative. Historically, if you see a lot of the changes in Nepal, and especially the advent of multi-party democracies because of political parties that were agitating for this. And, there were big people's movements and so on. So India has always stood for these democratic movements and processes. But ultimately, it's for Nepal and the Nepalese people to decide what kind of, politics, what kind of government, what kind of country Nepal should be. We would, of course, like Nepal to be a very strong democratic country. So I have mentioned this in my book. I have mentioned 2 visits, one by Mrs. Sushma Swaraj when she was External Affairs Minister. In fact, we had that function in this hotel. Second event was when our Home Minister, Mr. Rajnath Singh, had come for a SAARC Home Ministers conference. And this question was asked of him, that, when you were the BJP president, you were strongly in favor of Hindu Rashtra. Now that you're the Home Minister, what is your feeling? And what he said was that, look, this is something for the people and the leadership of Nepal to decide. There are institutions and individuals in India who would like Nepal to be a Hindu country. But this is something that, government of India does not have a view.
Not Indian establishment.
Exactly. So this is something for the people of Nepal to decide. Just to say that India-Nepal relationship is so important for both countries. We should focus on economic partnership, and also because the relationship is so intimate, there are bound to be problems and friction from time to time. But our effort should be not to allow this friction to become major irritants that damage the relationship. And our effort should always be to resolve these problems. And secondly, we must step up our engagement. A lot of the time, if there is no engagement, a lot of misunderstandings and misperceptions develop. So I stress constantly more engagement at government level, at political party level, at the level of the youth. So I think this is very critical. Well, the West has been engaged and present in Nepal for a long time. Recently, I did an article on the MCC and BRI, and I don't know where the politics of this issue is coming from in Nepal. The world has changed. The situation today is not the same 30 years ago, 40 years ago. Nepalis are traveling all over the world, studying all over the world. So are the Indians. India has also changed. So these are old thinking. And I think we are moving towards a more, integrated economic system. Of course, there are some problems with globalization. But I think the way forward is more engagement. Global geopolitics is very complicated right now. And, for a country like Nepal, it's very important how you negotiate and navigate this turbulence globally. So I think Nepal is best placed to decide what kind of relationship with which party it wants. But the way I look at it, this is something for Nepal, but the way I look at it is Nepal should try and benefit without compromising its independent foreign policy. So if a grant project from the US benefits the people of Nepal, helps in economic development, Nepal should have no difficulty. But and I don't see the link between MCC and some military alliance or anti-China. If you look at China itself, China's biggest partner in this whole modernization economic development was the US.
Yeah, after opening up.
After opening up, even though politically they had a lot of differences, but that did not prevent China from benefiting from the US. Look at India-China. We have many differences politically, but today our trade with China is booming and it is almost touching 100 billion US dollars. This is a big issue for India. And if you see the development of India-China relations, it was basically, while we kept peace and tranquility on the border and we were trying to resolve the border, meanwhile our economic engagement was progressing. But now the border understanding has been broken by the Chinese. So, this will naturally have repercussions on the overall relationship. And I think this is the point we have been trying to explain to China. That, it cannot be business as usual because the border issue is a very serious issue for India.
Emotional way, national.
Yes,
nationalism
and
ka
security
sawal hai.
related issue.
Right.
So,
Thank you, sir.
thank you.